Yo, so let's talk about the artillerist. So now we have the artillerist. The artillerist got reworked. I know the update has been out for a while, but it took me a while to look into all the builds and everything. Now, before I get into the build and everything about it, I want to just say something about this build. So there is a concept. I'm gonna show the whole build, but in the same time in the video, I'm gonna show different variation of the same build. So the first thing you're gonna see the normal build. So just in this build, there's always gonna be changes. So the first one, which is gonna be the normal one, is gonna consist of highest damage, highest tankiness, highest and lowest price. But I'm going for all of them. Like I'm trying to reach all of them together. Obviously, it's not gonna be higher than the other. That's the first one. The second one will be higher damage, but but more price and riskier more because you take more damage. And then in the same version, we'll have a glass cannon type build for the artillerist where you're still gonna have 15% negative damage reduction, but you're still gonna go for full damage, no tankiness, no armor, no like shields, no anything. Alright. And then lastly, there is gonna be a different build where I'm gonna be very tanky and lose some damage, but the price will go to the floor. It will be even cheaper than this. And within the last build, I'm gonna talk about different variation of this build because the build is a bit more flexible than other builds that I made before. So like there's gonna be flexibility which will help you change the build a little bit to your play style. Alright, with that being said, let's talk about the first build of it. So in this build, we're focusing on your firepower meter and not the barrage. I'm not playing barrage in all of them. The reason I'm not playing barrage, we'll talk about at the end of the video. Alright, so the first thing we're going for is the stats. So for the stats, we're gonna go for 1300 stats for crit, and then we're gonna go for 700 spec. Basic meaning that we're gonna go for full crit except one ring will be spec. So all of them crit except one ring will be spec, and obviously the necklace will have crit and spec. That goes for the stats. So after the stats, let's talk about the engravings we're going for in this build, and then we'll talk about the build. So the engravings we're going for this build, as you can see, we're going for firepower enhancement. So this is the main grudge and then keen blunt. These are the first three you're gonna use, and then after that barricade and hitmaster. The reason I added barricade and hitmaster in this build is that you can go for full damage with barricade and yet maintain the price of the build, and still works really well. And I will tell you exactly that with numbers what is the difference you get from playing something like barricade and playing something like curse door, because I tested all of it. So in firepower enhancement, I feel it's now in a good position because the price of firepower enhancement is really low. So it's really good because you get high value for low price. I like that for now. And keen blunt is a necessity, plus grudge, and then hitmaster. Obviously you go for these three, and then after that you can go barricade and hitmaster. And if you're a 1445 character, I would highly recommend going for all of them because the prices of this build is really low. The prices of the build goes for the books itself. If you buy the books, you have the barricade, firepower enhancement, 800, 1000. So you're gonna buy the 20 books for 20k, and then here for like 18k or something. I think that's a really good price for now, especially if you already have it, and that also barricade can work for some other classes. And for the build itself, since I'm playing crit, not full spec, and that will decrease the prices a lot. Like here, for example, this is one of the pieces I bought. Like the prices of the pieces are very low. Obviously you want to go for higher quality, so you might pay a bit more, but you can still go for the option with the lower quality and go with it. It still works. Alright, so that's for the engravings and why the build is going to be a little bit cheaper than other builds. Now let's talk about the skills we're using for this build. I'm gonna divide the skills and the runes because I want to talk about the runes a bit more, so we'll talk about it after we talk about the skills we're using. So the first skill we have is enhanced shell. So the most important thing of this ability is to make it level 4, to go for defense, and after that you can go for level 10, and then even after that you can go for level 12. This ability you would think it doesn't deal a lot of damage, but it does deal a good amount of damage. It deals 700 and then another attack for a 1.32. So it will usually average 2 million, but it's a 2 million damage per 4 seconds because that's a very low cooldown ability, right? So 4 seconds, compare that to a big nuke that has 18-second cooldown, and this is a 4 second. You'll see there actually deals decent amount of damage. After that, we have our counter ability. So this is what we're gonna use for counter. Forward Barrage. Forward Barrage can stay at level 4. You don't even need to get any tributs for it. I put load and I leveled it up because I already had it from the old build. It's not important, but it doesn't hurt to have it, because even leveling up the barrage mode might be useful sometimes. Maybe in some mechanics you can skip them by using your barrage mode. You can also go to level 7 to get quick prep, and that will help you to have a lower cooldown ability. Instead of the ability being 8 seconds, it will be 5 seconds. That helps you a lot. After that, we have summon turret. Summon turret is gonna be one of your damaging abilities. So we have here more duration for the turret, damage, and then damage. Okay. After that, we have flamethrower. Flamethrower will have quick prep, shield, and flame. Now for quick prep, level 1 shield and level 1 flame. That you can go for them. You can go for level 1 shield. It doesn't have to be level 5. It does not matter. But for flame, it gives you more damage. Quick prep is a must to be level 5, and I'm gonna talk about that because it will really help in the rotation to have this at level 5, because the negative 9 seconds is essential to the build. And that's like, I'm losing damage adding fire, flamethrower than other abilities, but the cooldown for it is perfect to the build. After that, we have energy field. So mind, energy release, energy increase, and soul shield, so that gives you more cooldown. After that, we have heat bomb. Heat bomb, I like it because it has condense, turns it into a hold ability. So this ability with the hold and activity the barricade will deal a lot of damage. Like, you're always gonna deal a lot of damage using this ability. So it deals like 6 million 3 times, so that's 18 mil, and it has a high cooldown. But I like it because you can go and play it in 2 ways. You can all play it with mobile and lose some of the damage, but it will be faster. So like that, it's faster, but you're losing some of the damage. Obviously, you're not losing that much. If I use barricade here, it will go up to like a really closer. It's closer, and it's lower cooldown. But I like it to have high cooldown and higher damage because it will really help when you go and try to nuke a boss. Alright. So we have after that more damage and then more damage. These are the highest damage rotation for it. We have air raid. Go for quick fire. You can leave quick fire to lower levels for the speed, but the higher the speed is, the more cleaner the rotation will be. Flame barrage for more damage, the big one for more damage. And then we have homing barrage. We have guide, weak, and power for more damage. So these are your damaging abilities and everything, all the tributs. Now for the tributs, before we move on, the levels for the tributs in this build is not, oh, I need level 1s on 2. No, it goes for all of them. Just level up any tribut you have, it will give you damage. Some tributs, they're not that important. Like for example, forward brush, you don't really care about the tributs here. Flamethrower, you don't care about the shield. Some of them thing, but mostly the build deals damage all together. So any level up, anything that you can level up, it's gonna increase your damage. Alright, so now the runes. The reason I left the runes alone is that there is not a specific rune that you need in this build. I do not lack anything. The only thing you might lack, if you in a Trixion fight, you might lack some mana, but that doesn't happen in a normal fight, because with a normal fight you have a support which will give you mana. So that even that is not the problem in a normal fight, which I will always like leave videos to play so you can see how it looks. I don't run out of mana in Guardian Raids, anything, nothing. So with that being said, what runes are we gonna go for? So I would highly recommend to have something like quick recharge, because you have a high cooldown, so we can have it on a low cooldown ability like Enhanced Shell, which might give you the reset, like the negative 12% cooldown when it's skill used. That's really cool to have that. You can also add Purify and add Rage. The things that you want to have always is quick recharge, bleed on summon turret, you can add Gale Wind on Heat Bomb and Flamethrower, and Flamethrower is not a big must, but you can also do that. Since you have a shield on it, you're not in high risk. And then most of the rest have Rage and Quick Recharge depending on what runes you have. But ideally, add more Quick Recharge than Rage because you don't really need Rage as much. But at least add the Legendary Rage on Forward Barrage if if in a fight that you cannot cleanse anything, add it on Forward Barrage because it's the second lowest cooldown ability you have in your build. Alright? After that, we have the card set we're gonna use. So the card set we're gonna use is Crit. So this is what we're using here. We're using the Crit card set, and just because the whole build is based on Crit, so it will be really good to have more Crit. I know that I am going for higher Crit here. So like if you calculate all the Crit, you might reach 85%, but that's good. You can still be viable with 75, but I like it a little bit more. And that's why I lost some of the Crit and I got some spec. But the ratio between how much Crit and how much spec you're gonna get, the spec doesn't help you as much as you would think. So having the chances to always Crit is better. For the gear we have Hallucination for more Crit and Crit damage. It works really well with the build. So this Hallucination set we have, and then after that, last thing we have in the build are the gems. So the gems are gonna go like this. So some of the abilities are gonna be main abilities that need everything. So we have Homing Barrage will have damage and cooldown, Air Raid damage and cooldown, Heat Bomb damage and cooldown. After that, we have Summon Turret has damage. Focus on the damage, not the cooldown. So Summon Turret gets damage, Shield gets energy, Flamethrower gets damage, and Enhanced Shell gets damage. The last wild gem is the cooldown for the Summon Turret. It's not a must, you can add it, but it doesn't really affect a lot in the build because the cooldown gain that you get from the Summon Turret is not as effective, but you cannot really use it on anything else, so it's good on the Summon Turret. Now let's talk about how this build plays. So in this build you have few things you have to always think about, but after that the build is simple and easy, high damage. So when you go in a boss fight, right, so this is 436 million, which is 3.8 million DPS per second. That's what I had with this build, using Barricade, by the way. So this is the damage we're gonna compare to later on, and we're gonna talk about all the different variation, and each variation will talk about how much extra damage you're gonna get. So that's how much damage you deal with this build. Now, this build plays like this. You wanna go on the boss and hit the boss with the always Enhanced Shell, leaving the turret out, but Enhanced Shell to always keep the party thing. You want to level up your firepower meter, but it's a simple thing. And then you want to go with the 2 nukes and in the same time use Flamethrower. These are the combo you have, because the Flamethrower will always give you a shield, so it's a guarantee to have a shield which will affect the Barricade buff. And then from there you always deal the damage. You don't have to depend on your support. The reason I didn't add a cooldown for it is that you see, once I have them, I almost have the Flamethrower, so I can even use it on cooldown. It's okay because they come with it. The animation that takes me to drop these bombs is around 3 seconds, so that goes with it. That's why I didn't need cooldown for it. And then you have Heat Bomb, you use it whenever you want to deal damage. So here, and deal high damage always again. Now the time where I use Barrage is when I feel like I need to keep it for a boss mechanic, or I have a downtime in the build, because sometimes you have downtime. Now the downtime is not a bad thing per se in my opinion, because right now I have a downtime. I can look around and dodge perfectly in the boss and not fear that I'm gonna die. Also, I am tankier than most classes, so that gives you a benefit that other classes don't have. Alright, now after that let's talk about different variation of the build. So let's talk about the fact if you're an Artillerist main and you want to deal max damage. The first things you can do to increase your damage is lose the Barricade. And if you do lose the Barricade, you not only gonna gain damage because you lost Barricade and you have Curse Doll, you also can change. So if you do that, your average damage will go up here from 3.86 million per second, the damage per second. You're gonna go to 4.07 DPS per second. Obviously, this is all 2 minutes. This is a 2-minute run, 2-minute. If I did a 1-minute, I'll have way higher damage. And the changes you'll have is gonna be Curse Door. Curse Door will make your build a bit more expensive, but you will deal more damage and you get a risk. Now, since you did do that with the Curse Doll, you're not only gonna change the Curse Doll, you can also change some of the abilities. So you can lose this and add Gravity Explosion. So Gravity Explosion will be your second ability you get instead of the Flamethrower, which will make you deal more damage. You can go crit, damage. Obviously the crit doesn't need to be leveled up because you have so much crit. There's nothing else you can get. You can get more the merrier, but it only helps really when you go in chaos dungeon and stuff like that. Alright, now, and we'll give it a damage rune. So we'll take the damage from the Flamethrower, give it here. That's one version. Now here's another one where you go blast cannon DPS. You lose also the shield ability. So this is another ability you use, and you go for multiple rockets. Now if you do that, you'll lose all of your shields in your build. So that's why you can't play really Barricade here. And then you go Flame Rocket, Quick Barrage, and max it out, and you will deal a lot of more damage. Your average DPS, you're gonna hit up, like I'll show the number, I don't remember the number exactly, but you're gonna go for 500 for half a million or more. Your average DPS will increase by, like, I think it was, you're gonna have a 70 million increase in damage if you do this. Now if you do this change, you will also wanna add a bit more Gale Winds in your build, because you have a bit more abilities that might make you stuck in a place, so you don't want that. And looking at the gems you're gonna go for in this build, you will lose obviously the shield one, Summon Turret will lose the cooldown, and Flamethrower will lose it, and then we'll go for Multiple Rocket will gain a cooldown, a damage, and then lastly we'll give Gravity Explosion will get a damage one. That's the changes in the build. Now what I recommend here in this build, or like if you switch this variation of the build, is that I would highly recommend this to have this. You could have these two builds together in a way, just because even if you play with the Barricade, or even if you try to play with the Barricade, you can also balance it to go more damage if you have a support that's gonna cost to give you shields. But obviously if you have Barricade, you cannot do it. But if you play Curse Doll from the beginning, you can still play with the shield version and lose it only when you do something easier. But I highly recommend having the shield, because having the shield will make you deal damage in higher, riskier dungeon. Right now there's nothing risky, but maybe with Brochaza coming out, it will be a bit more challenging. Alright, now let's talk about the tankier version build. Alright, so in the last version of the build, which is the tankiest one, you will have to go with, we'll go back to the normal version for the skills, and you will go Ether version instead of Barricade. Now it's a very questionable way to play it. I understand that you're losing damage. So how much damage you're losing? I can't really do it in Trixion, it's hard, but I can tell you that you're losing around 5% of your damage overall in the whole run. And then for the first 3 minutes you lose around an average of 17 to 15% of your damage for like 3 minutes. And then after that you lose only 5% of your damage. So overall in a whole run, let's say you lost like 10% of your damage, not even 10%, I say even less, like 6.3% or something. But you gain something that you wanna know about, is that when you deal higher damage, yes, you're gonna kill the boss faster, but if you're tankier, you get the chance to deal damage even if you're taking damage. Like I'm going in a boss fight and I'm trying to deal high damage, and the boss is gonna hit me, and I know I'm gonna take damage. In a normal scenario, I have to dodge it, but in a scenario where I'm this tanky, I don't have to dodge anything. Like some of the abilities I can tank it, even if, especially if I have a shield. I can go on DPS in windows that are not allowed for. So this build is just a quick funny build I wanted to add. I highly recommend it for new players or someone that wanna try the game with a tanky version class, so you can see more. This is a highly recommended, and especially this build will cost you like nothing. It's let's be honest, it's Ether Predator, Barricade, and Firepower Enhancement. If these two engravings will, if you try to find Keen Blunt with Ether Predator, it will cost you like what, 3 gold. But the only problem you might find is finding the items. Alright, so that's just the last thing. Now I wanted to talk about a quick thing before we wrap this build, is that the build is a bit flexible. Meaning is that I have tested the build in different versions. So the first thing I tested is that I lost some of my crit to get more spec than this, and I lost some of the spec to get more crit. What happens in all of these? The difference that happens is that it's a circle where you lose a little bit of your damage, but you change your play style. Is it good or is it bad? I feel it's more your play style. Obviously, the stats that I showed right now shown to be the best, but it's also that depends on your party a little bit. I want to maximize it for the highest raids, not for the lowest raids, but at the same time you can still go for it. You can, like, if you really can't find a crit or like the spec item, you can go for it, but I highly do not go below 1200. If you go 1000 only, it's kinda might go in the danger zone. There is also a different change where you go spec. You go swiftness. Instead of going spec, you go swiftness. Now what happens with the swiftness is that you lose some of your damage, but you gain a cooldown, which basically if you go the 700 swiftness, it will give you like 13% cooldown. That 13% cooldown is gonna give you like in a one whole raid like maybe 3-4 more times to do your rotation. So it's a little bit, it just adds a little bit of less risk because you might miss some of your combos. It could be also a better way, but that's not a big positive because you're losing a good amount of damage, especially if the game is all about big nukes and high damage when your supports give you like this big buff. But with that being said, you can still go for the swiftness just because it will reduce the price of the build a lot. For engravings, you can lose the curse doll and the barricade for something like adrenaline. Yes, you lose, but if you do go adrenaline, it has a different perspective. Since you're gaining 15% crit from the adrenaline, you can always keep up the adrenaline because you have too low cooldown. You can lose some of your crit to get some more spec, or you can switch your gear, your build, your R set, but in overall you're not gaining damage, you're losing damage. So it is flexible in the term where like you can go them, but you lose like what, 20-30 million in the 2 minute. It's not a big deal because especially that when you fight a boss, you're not like Trixian, you're not hitting the boss on cooldown all the time. So in a general way, I don't think you're losing that much damage, and if it suits you to go that, it suits you. And especially if you have like something from a different character, you have already adrenaline, for example, something like that, you can also go Ether Predator if you want in the build. I have played with Ether Predator for a while just because that changes the price for the build. I think it's a very good engraving. Alright. The last thing we want to talk about is the barricade build. The reason I didn't make the barricade build is for now I have tested some versions of the barricade. I can so like with the barricade test I dealt 487.5 million, so 3.9 damage per second. For me, that's not worth it. The damage is not high enough because I out damaged it with the firepower meter, or if I don't play barricade, if I play curse doll. But also note, this is in Trixian, so in a normal fight I'll have more shields from support. So I think even with the barricade build I can out damage the barrage mode. Now the barrage mode also has a problem where you go inside the barrage, so you can't move. So if the boss is doing a big mechanic, you will die. And lastly, the cost for the build is really high, and I don't think it's in a good position. I'm doing more testing with it, but for now I prefer the firepower because it's very low price, and it gives you it's so in conclusion, the firepower in build, it has more damage, lower price, and easier to play. So it just makes sense to play it for now until I figure out a way to make the barrage build better. There is also a build that I might go for, but I'm still trying to make it work, which is a mixture between the normal build and the barrage build, both in with each other. Alright, So that's basically everything about the new artillerist build. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you have any questions, leave it down in the comment, and see you in next one. Goodbye.